All right. Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to Radio Northern Beaches 88.7 and 90.3 FM. I'm your host, Melissa, and these are the Hummingbird Talks. We happen every Wednesday, and the aim of the show is to educate and inspire the everyday person about spirituality, health, and wellness. So each week I have a different guest on speaking about a range of topics designed to inspire and facilitate a direction towards wholeness, happiness, and self-awareness on this journey we call life. And Mel Wood, you're here with me again. I absolutely love it. How's life going for you?
Probably really different to the last time I was on with you because I
Yeah.
am now 8.5 months pregnant. So yes, feeling a lot of different emotions and feelings and feet swelling and all of those fun things.
Yeah.
But yeah, really excited to talk about the topic with you today. It's very relevant for my life right now.
Oh, is it relevant? So, guys, speaking about the topic, so we're actually going to do this show probably about a month or two ago, but too much stuff came up for me. It's even coming up for me again, just a lot of emotional healing, if I can say. So, we're going to speak about the mother wound today. And it's not that I don't love my mum. I was just telling Mel that I'm 37 and still need my mum. It's it's just unresolved issues between us that's healing. And if I can say, I've never had a more better relationship with my mum now than I've ever had before. So Mel, how are things going with your mum before we get into this topic?
Look, Mum and I are probably again in the best spot we've ever been in my entire life. I guess we've really bonded over me being pregnant, and she lives in Perth, so
Yeah.
we've had to kind of tackle the beautiful dance of does she fly, does she not fly, does she quarantine, and that's been really hard to navigate. But what I am realizing, and I sort of was reflecting this morning thinking, I probably respect my mum the most I ever have in my life right now. And it's probably just going to continue to grow, because when you become a mother, you then appreciate what your own mother did for you. So yeah, we're in a very good place. That's not to say that we probably don't still push each other's buttons
Yeah.
sometimes, but we are definitely, and that's probably why I feel comfortable to speak about it now, because we're two adults who just have this completely different relationship that we had, say, maybe when I was 14.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's what it is, I think, with the mother wound or, growing up and, as you said, becoming a mum yourself. It's going out at that 14-year-old self or that teenage self, having so much angst and, hate and wanting to be independent
Yeah.
towards your mum. So it's just coming to a mutual understanding in a way,
Mm.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very healing time, I think. And whether you are having your own child or not, like it's in your 30s, I think is a really healing time for daughters and mothers, because we are stepping into our adult selves,
Yeah.
and we are realizing the lessons that maybe they taught us that we didn't appreciate at the time. So it is a
Yeah.
very, in your 30s and 40s, healing those relationships and those I guess those things that nobody meant to do to hurt anyone. It's just
Yeah.
life, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, Mel, we're going to get straight into it, but just a reminder, because it's not like we're not experts in this industry. We both do emotional healing. You're a Reiki practitioner, so explain to everyone what you actually do.
Yeah, so I my work's evolved quite a bit in the last few years. Actually, I sort of started. My background is in corporate TV sales for about 15 years, but I went into my own business of life coaching and Reiki. But I still coach, but I do more sort of spiritual coaching and healing. And Reiki is used as a practice to help balance people's energy levels. So, and also to help release emotional trauma. So the work that I started doing has now become so much deeper and happens so much faster than what it ever has before. So, and I'm really sad to be leaving it for the next
Yeah,
few months, because I just got the juiciness of it, and now I'm
yeah.
having a break. So, yeah, so that's what I do.
Yeah, perfect. And like I've said before, an amazing practitioner. And really, the work that you do is absolutely wonderful. I actually felt the effects of the session. I think you remember that session that I had. I think within a couple of hours, everything had shifted. So it was really good. But Mel, explain, like, people are going to hear this, they're going to say mother wound, and they're going to say, yeah, I've got heaps of issues with my mum. Or they're going to go, no, I absolutely love my mum. What are you talking about? So let's go ahead and start off and explain what the mother wound actually is, if you can just
Yeah.
elaborate a bit on that.
Yeah, and I think, not enough people talk about it because it sounds aggressive, but it
Yeah.
really isn't. And Bethany Webster does a lot of work on the mother wound, and also the dailyom.com do a short course on understanding what the mother wound is, which is what I did. So the mother wound can be described as, when we are daughters, we are born from our mothers. There are generations and ancestral healing that needs to take place across, 7 generations before us. We
Mm.
carry our DNA from our mothers, our grandmothers, our great grandmothers. And the word wound does not necessarily mean, oh, mum hurt me or I hurt mum, therefore that's what it is. That's actually not that at all. It's understanding as women and as daughters where we've come from, what are some of the traumas associated with where our family has come from, and how can we move forward to release those traumas so that we can have a better future for ourselves and the daughters to come after us.
Yeah, so it's really just addressing those generational patterns, if it's what I'm understanding. So it's, all those traumas of, my mum, my grandmother, their parents, and so forth. It's just, I think we're saying enough's enough. We want something different. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, and it's understanding, like, possibly why our mothers behaved the way they did in the environments that they were raised in, and then how they kind of carried those traditions. And a lot of the traditions are so beautiful, like a lot of them. My husband just bought me this book called Nonna Knows Best, and
Yeah.
it's like, he goes, when we're calling our little baby girl Francesca to try and keep that Italian heritage alive, because I do love so much of what my grandmothers, my aunties, my mum taught me in
Mm.
that world. But it's also stripping back. Okay, well, what anxieties and fears do we not want to bring forward into Francesca's life so that she has a better chance of having the best chance of moving forward and making a change for the good?
Yeah, perfect. So let's clarify, because you're right. Like, Italian, Lebanese, we've got so many passionate traditions within our own cultures and within in our own families. So it's not to not associate with all of it, but what traditions, like you said, anxiety and fears, what would be some anxiety and fears that we're actually addressing when we say the mother wound?
So a lot of it comes from, when we look at the generations that our grandparents and great grandmothers grew up in, it was war times. So
Yeah.
a lot of them came from poverty. A lot of them came from just literally, not having enough to feed their families. And my grandmother came from a huge family. I can't
Mm.
even quote how many brothers and sisters exactly, but it was somewhere between 7 and 9 of them, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
wow.
so that was down southern Italy. And I have loved unpacking all of that with my mum and my grandmother, and listening to, there were times where they didn't even have enough cutlery to all eat together, so they
Mm.
had to share cutlery. And it's really just understanding that when you have ancestral history like that, it is stored in our bodies. So
Mm.
my grandmother would have had fear of not having enough, fear of being poor, fear of dying of starvation. They're all, when you look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they are all like our safety and security baseline, right? So
Yeah.
she would have had those fears growing up as a child because of the situation she was in. And
Yeah.
then, they moved to Australia. They migrated as they grew up and had kids in Australia. And it's not like that fear and anxiety goes away. And also, my grandmother just didn't have the time to worry about self-development or question why she was feeling certain things or how she did certain things. So what then starts to happen is the generations who came from war times and poverty hold on to those belief systems and ways of thinking, and then they pass them through to their kids as they birth them into the world.
Yeah.
And, with that comes love, because they are fearful because they love their children so much, but they are also anxious that will I be able to provide for my children, and do we have enough? So there
Yeah.
is the poverty extent of it, but there's also the safety and security. Back in Italy, when it was the war times, you could not trust anybody except your family. So you were always just, trust your family, do not trust anyone else. They're going to steal from us, or because people were stealing from other families.
Wow. Yeah.
So, it was one of those things where, my grandmother grew up like that. And then I guess when she had my mother, they grew up in quite a strict household in Australia. They were loved and they were cherished. And mum says, I loved my childhood. I got to play with my brothers and sisters, my cousins. That was what we had, was this beautiful community. But anything outside of that community was feared. It was like
Yeah.
you can have your friends at school, but when you come home, it's family. And
Yeah.
people aren't coming over here, it's just our family who are coming over. So
Yeah.
just looking at patterns and belief systems, that then my mum carried that into, I guess, raising me, because she loved my friends, but it was always a really hard thing for her to understand. Why do I want to spend so much time with my friends? I've got this massive family. And so, that's when conflict happens, because her belief system is, but you've got like all these cousins. I'm an only child, but I've got my cousins and my brothers and sisters. She's like, you got all these people to play with and do stuff with. Why do you need more people?
Yeah. Sorry, I had the same childhood as well. It was exactly like that. School was school, everything else was family. But we're not growing up, and it kind of leads to my next question, because we weren't growing up in that time. We weren't growing up, say, back in Lebanon or back in Italy. We're growing up in Australia, where thank God we did, but it's a bit more expansive. So you mentioned that, you yourself trying to break through those traditions, there was conflict, with you and your mum, and misunderstanding. So how did that actually play out as you were growing up, trying to break free and trying to integrate yourself?
Yeah, and that's, it's like that looking for Alabrandy stories, and then it's
Yeah.
like that movie couldn't have come at a better time in my life. I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, this girl is me. I want to have fun and do the tomato sauce, but I want to go out with my friends on a Saturday night.
Yeah. So
Um,
true.
yeah, look, it was really hard. And like I said, when we look back, and I have such empathy for my mum, because back then, she was just coming from a place of fear, because she had never experienced the things that I wanted to experience. So, I mean, and my personality, I hate being told what to do, and I go against the rules. So poor
Yeah.
mum, like she was, and you know what? This one in my stomach is probably going to do the same thing, because her dad is the same. So we've got
So you're
no
gonna
chance of trying to tell this child what and how to do things.
hell no.
But she really struggled, because I mean, let's think about it for a second. Like, she never went clubbing. She was
Mm,
always with her family on the weekends. There was no such thing as the girls going out on their own. It was just not done. It was cultural, the unspoken rules,
yeah,
whereas I'm sort of like taking my cousin Tina's ID. She's 3
yeah.
years older than me, and I'm having this life where I'm out in the bars and pubs in Perth at 16, and my mum's freaking out, and I don't blame her, because now I'm like, of course, mum, you would have freaked out. The things I used to wear sometimes, oh my God.
Yeah.
And it was funny, because at the time I had a boyfriend, and he was trying to tell me what to wear, and I was like, you're not my dad. It was a very rebellious like time of life. And so I
Yeah.
think that, now teenage culture's changed a lot. I don't necessarily know if they have that interest in hitting the clubs as such, but there's a
Yeah.
lot of online things that are going on where the parents are really struggling to get a hold on this, because when you look at it, the parents of the generations of teenagers right now, they didn't have Instagram and Facebook. And so,
Yeah.
it's constantly about adapting and evolving yourself as a generation to, I guess, open the lines of communication and see. My mum didn't have the words to
Yeah.
communicate with me and say, because she was never taught that, because it wasn't a thing. So
Yeah.
she was never taught to just sit down with me and say, like, how are you feeling right now? Understand it's really frustrating for you. But this is why it's frustrating for me, because I never went through this, and you're triggering a lot of fear in me. But I don't know, like parents, they don't want to ever put their hands up and say, I don't know how to parent. I've never parented
Yeah.
a teenager before. Whereas a lot of the women that are coming through my practice at the moment with their daughters who are around, say, 10 to 12, that age group, they're starting to get a deeper awareness of having open conversations with their daughters, saying,
Mm.
I appreciate you want your independence, but I'm really struggling to let you have that right now. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry that that's feeling unfair, but I've never done this before,
Yeah.
so being open and admitting it.
Yeah, and I think that's the one thing that we really wanted most from our parents, in a way, that open, honest communication, and
Yeah.
to not just see them as that authority figure, but to connect with them on a human people,
Yeah.
level. And, it's hard. Like, the more you're talking about it, the more appreciation I do have for my mum and my dad, because they went through a lot, being migrants, being the first generation in Australia. It wasn't easy. So here
Mm.
I am going, no, I want to do this and I want to do that. And they're like, hell no, you're not doing anything.
Yeah. What do you mean? It's like,
Yeah,
where's the emergency button? I don't know how to answer this question.
I'm going to wrap you up in cotton wool. I'm like, no. But Mel, you mentioned a good thing, like open, honest communication is really key, because that's what we're looking for these days. We're looking for the truth. Before we get into how we heal the mother wound, like, those conflicts that you have with your mum, like I know the conflicts that I had with my mum, and, the anger that I had, the resentment, because a bit like yourself, I was rebellious. I wanted to, freedom. I wanted to go out. So that caused strained, as in like a strained relationship, if I can get my words out.
Mm.
Being that I distanced myself from my mum, I felt like she didn't love me. I felt like, I could never be myself, that it was always her way, that sort of thing. So,
Mm.
how else would a person be feeling if they're in that conflict with their mum?
Yeah, that's a good point. Because the Daily Om course talks about the three different versions of the mother wound and how that can play out. So,
Yeah,
the first type, mother to archetype, is the attacker. So, and these three archetypes all come from a place of fear, right? So,
yeah,
it's like the attacker, or the mother's always on the defense of something, or always, you should do this, why aren't you doing that? You need to like change that, wear this, do this, right? So it's a sense of
yeah,
control. And then there's the absent mother, who is dealing with her own mental traumas and issues, but has no idea that she is dealing with them. And so, therefore, is a bit absent because she can't really see what's playing out in her own child's life. So, she's not fully present because she's dealing with something on herself.
yeah,
And then there's the overbearer, who is like the helicopter parent, right? And
yeah.
I don't judge any of this, because chances are I'm definitely going to be all three at some point in time, uh,
Yeah,
constantly, So it's
yeah,
constant lessons that we're always learning. But I think the benefit that we have in this day and age is that there's so many resources to learn about ourselves, so much more, and
yeah,
different ways of communication that are coming out every day. But the way that it plays out in those three roles is that, um, the daughter of the attacker, the absent, or the overbearer, just closes up. or rebels, because there's
Yeah.
no connection to, to the adult saying and admitting that, wow, this is what I went through when I was growing up, and that was really hard. And now that I've
Yeah.
got my own daughter, this is what's coming up for me. And wow, what can I do about my behavior? What do I need to forgive to help
Yeah.
for my daughter's and I's relationship to get better, So we
Yeah.
always got to bring it back to ourselves, because when Francesca comes into the world and she's a little baby and I'm angry and frustrated, I
Yeah.
can't say to her, it's your fault.
Yeah.
It's me. I've got to deal with, for me, I can already see that my biggest thing is control. And I just want everyone to be well all the time. And I just want everyone to be okay. And if she gets sick, I know that's really going to challenge me, because I
Yeah.
will go into a state of worry and panic and catastrophizing. So that is something that I'm going to really have to check in with myself to understand how I cannot put that on her and then
Yeah.
have her grow up like that and be worried all the time when something doesn't go right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in what you're saying, the three different types, the attacker, the absent mother, the overbearer, those three types can be in all, one person kind of thing. And in a way, you're saying it's not that you can't completely avoid being any of those archetypes. It's just having the awareness to go, okay, this is where I'm at right now. I'm being an attacker. It's coming from a place of fear. How do
Yeah.
I want to move forward with that? So, do you find by addressing the mother wound, or even doing this daily course, do you have more awareness, and how much has your perspective changed, the way of
Yeah.
being?
Yes, definitely. And the funny thing was, I downloaded the daily course in February and fell pregnant in April or March, April. And I was like, right, I knew I was preparing for something here.
Yeah.
And, a big thing that I guess came up for me this year, the very start of this year, was, my mother's family. We went through a lot between December of last year to now. So my mother's sister was diagnosed with stage 3 of advanced ovarian cancer. Okay, so
Yeah.
she's doing really well. She's had her chemo. She's an incredible woman. We're naming our daughter after her
Oh,
because
beautiful,
she's
Mel.
just so inspirational.
Yeah.
And then, we had to, as a family, make the decision to put my grandparents in aged care, because my mother and my auntie could no longer look after them.
Yeah.
So, sometimes, and then that raised a lot of things in me, right? Because I was really feeling for my mum and my auntie, and it raised a lot about generations, history, why we do things the way we do them, burnout, how my mother and auntie were feeling during that time,
Yeah.
how my grandmother felt going into aged care, how the women of the family felt about this transition. It was like, they cared so much for my grandparents, and they still felt this massive guilt when they put them in aged care.
Yeah.
They sacrificed themselves to be able to look after my grandparents. And then, my grandfather passed away in March.
Mm.
And so it was a lot of things coming up generationally for me that just made me think, I don't ever want it to get to that stage in my future family where my own daughter feels so much guilt around my health and happiness that in turn this creates this stress. I
Yeah.
just really I really felt for my auntie and my mother, and
Yeah.
my cousin as well. She was really, very highly involved in all of that caretaking, and
Yeah.
I just wanted to find answers as to why the women of the family go through so much trauma. Of course the men do as well, they absolutely do,
Mm.
but it's our responsibility at the end of the day as women,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that is wounding. That is going through the process of understanding what's the trigger here to want to find out more about how you are showing up as a woman and for your daughter. What's the
Yeah.
big event that happens, the catalyst for you to force yourself out into that situation?
Yeah. You know what, Mel, just hearing what you've just been through, and look, I was there with you for some of the time, and I know how stressful it was for you going through all of that earlier in the year. But you've really just unraveled the life experience of what we're here to do in our human lives is to just live and breathe our human experience, be really work on ourselves and really help heal what has happened and start breathing new life and start getting answers. I don't know if I articulated it right, but Mel, you've gone through a whole heap, and it's just really showcasing what life is about. It's about managing it in a way, or not just managing it. I don't know how to put it in words, but I had the thought and it's left me. So I'm just going to leave it at that. But I was just in appreciation that, what you said and the question that I asked, awareness, it was coming through your own life experiences, that awareness of what needs to be healed. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can only, unfortunately, for us, because our life is so busy, right? And
Yeah.
unfortunately, it takes a series of traumatic events for a family unit to realize that, okay, we need to do this differently,
Yeah.
and it's of no fault of, we don't, I don't mean to say it's men's fault, because it's not, because then
Yeah.
there's a lot of men who need to do a lot of healing as well, because we've as a society over generations put men in a position of, you're useless, just go to work and do your job,
Mm,
and you can't even think for yourself outside of work, so we'll do everything else. And so,
yeah.
it's a combination of society, it's culturally, and so then, we end up in this place of, and things that have unraveled since my pregnancy. I mean, some days I've had so much rage towards my husband about the house staying clean. And I don't know where it's coming from, because I do like a clean house, but this
Yeah.
is like ridiculous rage. This is like, I can't believe you didn't do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna kill you.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
I just and it feels to me like I'm unraveling generations of women having to do everything, and all
Yeah.
of the load being put on our shoulders. But we also need to give men the opportunity to stand up and to do the things, and we're doing too much for them, so we're not allowing them to step forward. And
Yeah.
that's where a lot of mother wounding comes from as well, because it's a lot of resentment, it's a lot of oh, I've got to pick up after the kids. Yeah, you do, but at some point in time we need to get better as women at educating the kids and the husbands in the house of,
Mm,
mum does not do everything and mum won't do everything, because
yeah.
we end up the ones who are suffering. And then we can't have those fulfilling relationships with our daughters because we're too fucking tired. Sorry for the
Yeah.
language, but
Yeah.
I see women every day coming exhausted, and it's because we're not communicating enough about what we need and how we feel. And it's
Yeah.
up to the men in our lives to also step up and to start recognizing that.
Yeah. Well said. Like,
Sorry,
this
I was
is,
went into a bit of a feminist rant. It's
but
hormones.
yeah, it's the hormones. It's the hormones. No, no. Like, well done for doing that rant, because you articulated it perfectly. Better than I could, as just a couple of minutes beforehand tried to articulate something. But Mel, you're so right. It's that martyrdom. It's that, taking everyone's burdens and trying to process it as a woman or as a mother kind of thing. And it comes down to that. Well, the question I want to ask is that control and fear. Generationally, is it generational, or what amount of control and fear is still instilled with us
Mm,
now? Like, where is this control and fear? Because I've just read a book, it's called Anna, Grandmother to Jesus, and they really stepped into that trust and surrender into the divine plan kind of thing.
mm.
So where do you think this control and fear comes from? I know generationally, but is there other aspects, because we're living in today's moment, today's life? So
Yeah. Yeah, where does, because an element is your DNA, right? And it's
Yeah.
but we also have the power to change that through epigenetics and changing our environment, and being very aware of the patterns that we are following as a generation. But
Yeah.
also, I think it's society. Like, I see it, we live in Sydney, and I see that drive every day of like, you got to do better, you got to be better, you got to have this, do this, everything has to be finished. Like, it's just this
Yeah.
this drive that happens in society. And that was before COVID, and I guess after COVID, people are learning to maybe slow down and reconsider things. But I think we're forced, in a sense, to feel like we need to control things because there is so much going on in our lives. So,
Mm.
you take out the generational patterns, and there is still, kids after school activities to do, like there's all the house stuff, all the, like, there is just so much that we can pack into our lives now, that we almost need to feel control so that it doesn't all get out of control.
Yeah.
And way that control played out for me, like I said, with my raging attacks at my poor husband, who's probably like permanently scarred, but
Yeah. It's all right.
I'll give you an example of what's going on in my head right now. Like, I cannot control when this baby comes, how she comes. I've got no idea what labor pain feels like. So I can't control whether, the amount of times people have asked me if I'm going to have an epidural. And I'm like, I just don't know. I would like not
Yeah.
to, but I have no idea what labor pain feels like. So I can't answer that question. But because I'm like a duck, like I'm trying to keep everything happy and calm on the surface and answer everyone's questions. But
Mm.
on the inside, I'm shitting my pants. Like, I'm, I know that's
Yeah.
very graphic, sorry, but
Yeah.
there's no other way for me to, like, I am
No.
petrified of this, like everyone's like, yeah, you're a Reiki practitioner, you're so chill. Yeah, yeah, great. But when something's like about to happen, in like a labor situation, I mean, I will try and breathe, but I don't know. And so the way
Yeah.
control plays out for me is I will control my house to a T to make sure every single thing is neat and tidy. And if people in my house can't keep to that standard, then I have a blow up. And so
Yeah.
that's how, when we talk about recognizing where the behaviors are shifting and moving,
Yeah.
I have lack of control over the birth. Therefore, I know I have complete control in my house when it's clean. So I'm going to act like a maniac and just clean and clean and clean, and I'm going to yell a
Yeah.
few times as well, because that makes me feel better. What I really want to say, and what I have said to my husband since, is, say the sentence, why don't you just freaking clean up after yourself? Why don't you just empty the dishwasher? What I really want to say is, yes, that frustrates me,
Yeah.
but I am so scared of this birth, and it's just us. I constantly am worried, am I going to be okay? Are we going to be okay? And so that's how you can sort of talk about that in the mother-daughter role is, instead of, why can't you bloody pick up after yourself? You leave your wet towels on the floor all the time.
Yeah.
Go deeper. Yeah, that's annoying. But what's the real thing going on between the two of you at the moment as a mother and daughter? What's really playing out? And try
Yeah.
and have that honest dialogue, and it changes everything.
Yeah. Perfect. And look, I don't think you're going to avoid those rages in a way. They're going to be, I was going to say few and far between, but you can't predict life, if I can say so. Mel, sure, explaining the mother wound, like, just to kind of recap, you've said that the mother wound, it's that mother-daughter relationship, even though, some sons can feel it too as well. I was speaking with my manager yesterday, and she was explaining the relationship with the son is different to the relationship with her daughter. And it's just unintentional, but it is. Um, so you've explained there's archetypes of different mothers, so the attacker, the absentee mother, the overbearer mother, and I think that's self-explanatory in those words. And a lot of the mother wound comes from fear and control. Mel, you've mentioned open communication is a way forward because, with the work that you do and I do as well, we're healing the mother wound. We're trying to bring up the conflicts, bring awareness to the conflicts that we've had before so we can go, oh, that's coming up again. I want to choose a different path. So, how does someone know they've got a mother wound? Let's ask that question. How does someone know they've got a mother wound? Because I didn't know I had a mother wound until someone told me, until I started doing this work. So how does someone know they've got it or need to heal it?
I think we can all assume that we all do, right? And
Yeah,
to what extent is different for everyone. But I think that in the generations that have passed us, we all need to assume that there is something unresolved between, mother and daughter, or yeah, whatever. And that doesn't even have to even play out in a biological mother-daughter relationship. That can even play out in women who raised you. So aunties can play out in, older siblings or cousins in families. So we have to be a bit open-minded with it. But I think the way of, I guess, recognizing what that is sometimes it's just about writing some things down, and
yeah,
sometimes it's really painful. Like I always have to be very careful about how I talk about my clients and their mother journey with their own mothers, because a lot of them don't speak to their mothers anymore. And
yeah,
a lot of them have left their lives. And that's really, really deep and traumatic. So,
yeah,
we are talking very surface level today for some people, because some people will never be able to explore the mother wound like how we are speaking today. And
yeah,
that is okay. But on a very basic level of, oh, how do I know I have a mother wound? What really pisses you off about your mum?
yeah.
Let's break it down. Let's talk like around the big Italian ethnic Lebanese
Yeah.
table, and let's just talk honest shit for a second. Like,
Yeah.
what grates you about your relationship with mum? What's one
Yeah.
thing that she always says that you go, I wish she wouldn't say that, because every time she says that, I get so angry. Like, so
Yeah.
start with the little things, like or what's one thing that I say to my mum that she always gets like
Yeah.
upset with, or and
Yeah.
yeah, like back, I know with my mum, like, and this is a lot of mothers, but I swear, I mean, obviously I've sworn a few times on this
Go for it. I love it.
because that's me, that's how I express,
Yeah.
but my mum doesn't swear, and that's okay. Like, it's fine that she doesn't swear, but it is something that, she's obviously become more relaxed about it over the years. But
Yeah.
she doesn't like that. And also, I barely drink now, but my mum has never been a big drinker. So I
Mm.
always know that if I'm and I look back at some things that I used to do, and I was rebelling, like I remember
Yeah.
one wedding we went to. I think I was like 20 or something, and I don't even, like, smoking for me is not really a thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I will correct that and say that probably over Christmas time, because I knew that I was going, oh, I just had a feeling I'd get pregnant this year. And I went into this like bit of a like rebellious 48-hour period over Christmas and New Year's, where I was
Yeah.
like, I'll have a couple of smokes and a couple of drinks. And then I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not me. But, when I was 19 or 20, we went to this family wedding, and I remember like having a cigarette, and I think she saw me. She knew I was doing it. And it really got to her because she just never did it. And it wasn't, and she was just coming from a place of love, because she was like, don't put that
Yeah.
in your body. Like, I created you. Don't ruin your body. Like, you know. But
Yeah.
at the time, I was like, nah, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so cool,
It's so cool. Look at me.
Yeah, look at me. I've got durries in my hand.
Yeah.
Perth bogan in me. So with durries.
Don't
Um,
worry, it's here in Sydney too.
So, it's just looking at behaviors and things that maybe still trigger like as adults. And I don't sit there
Yeah.
and smoke in front of mum now. Like it's not
Yeah.
that, but that's just a really simple example of something that, yeah, what grates each other about certain behaviors.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the clearest example because, look, my parents are both smokers, especially my mum, so I can't really use that example, but she still tried to stop us. I believe she still tried to stop us from doing it. But the thought was, well, if you're going to do it, I'd rather you do it in front of me than, anywhere
Yeah.
else kind of thing. So,
Yes.
I think of the ways that I grate my mum and the fact that I tell her, no, you should be doing this and you should be doing that and you should be doing this. She absolutely hates it. So,
Yeah, and then you got to look at yourself and go, well, where does that come from? Like, and
yeah,
maybe, growing up, she was using those sentences on you, and now
yeah,
you're using her tricks on
yeah.
her.
And she doesn't like it.
Exactly. And that's what can happen too, as like we get
Yeah,
older, and then we start saying things to our mums that they said to us when we were younger. And
yeah,
because you do flip, you go between like parent and child, right? You sort of,
yeah,
as you get older and your parents get older, and it's really interesting. You use your language back on your mum, and she's
yeah.
like, "Wow, don't tell me what to do." Yeah, now you know.
Exactly. Because the thought when we first were discussing this show, the statement that came up is, I'm your mother and I said so. You've got to
Yes.
do it because I'm your mother and I said so. So, what, like, when we hear that, obviously that's no explanation at all because, of all that, all the history and tension and, angst between us. So, that's not a statement at all. But how does that statement kind of affect us? Growing up and, just even being adults. I'm your mother and I said so. So.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess parenting is going in a really different direction now, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
I follow this Natural Parent magazine on Facebook, and they're very different styles of communication with children, right? So,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of arguing for and against that way of being, because we still have to remember at the end of the day, the adult is the adult and the child is the child, and the child does need to listen to the adults so that they don't kill themselves in the early years of their life, because
Yeah. Yeah.
they are vulnerable. They don't know, simple things like crossing the street. Like, you need to listen to your mum to know when to cross the street, because otherwise you get in trouble. And so
Yeah.
I guess when we start using that language, because I'm your mother and said so, and we hit into teen years and 20s and 30s, that especially 30s, by the time you're in your 30s and your mum says because I said so, you go, come on, mum.
Yeah. Like, seriously.
But there is that transition, and I guess that's why when we talk about the teenage years, that's hard, because you're still in that phase of, because I'm your mum and I said so, and you need to do this because I'm doing this for your safety, versus they're trying to form their independence. So
Yeah.
it's like, but I don't want to listen to you. So that's where the open communication is really important, because we want to, as mothers, would want to say, just do it. I
Yeah.
know better. I know that you will be better if you make this decision. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's facilitating. It triggers us because we want our independence, but it's facilitating a way out of, I'm the adult, you're the child, so listen to what I have to say. And that's tricky, but we have to just be open to it. We have to be open to also remembering what we were like as teenagers, and
Yeah.
we have liked that said to us. No.
Yeah. No. It's yeah. I don't want to go back to when I was a teenager. Oh God, that awkwardness. That please, mommy, I want to do it. And it's like
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, and my poor mum, like, I used to, have these parties every year for my birthday, right? And I
Mm,
used to, say, oh, I'm having a party. Yeah, I'm only going to have like 20 people, and then like 100 people rock up. And, I really put them through the ringer. And my dad still swears he's lost all of his hair because of me. I say, well, you look better now without the hair, and you got less time to get ready in the morning.
Love it. Now, like you've given like a really clear example of how the mother wound affects us and just how it plays out in our lives. So I said, let's talk about how we heal the mother wound. And, you know, the first thing you said was open communication. Obviously, healing the mother wound through Reiki, through emotional healing, through, you know, kinesiology, any form of modality. But I think the question I want to ask is, your clients are coming to you and they've got mother wounds, or they're trying to better the relationship with their daughters as well. So how have you seen healing that wound or healing the relationship with their own mothers change in their daughters, you know, their own relationship with their daughters?
Yeah, it's been beautiful to see. I have the advantage where I get to work on mothers and their daughters, and their energy makeup is quite similar when you're working on their bodies, as you would know in kinesiology. It's
Yeah.
it's a very familiar feeling, and they carry a lot of the same. I guess the younger the daughters, the intensity, you know, you can channel very quickly into a teenager's body because they are still so open, whereas, you know,
Yeah.
as adults we've had a lot of wounding, so we do have a lot of like guards up and shields. So
Yeah.
I think what I've learned about a mother who is open to exploring her own mother wound is so much more able to come from a place of empathy with their daughters and start to see the patterns playing out.
Yeah.
Because once you have that connection to yourself and you have that self-awareness of your own patterns, you can then come from a very grounded place of, okay, she's doing what I do. This is what I did when I was her age, or this is what I still do now. So it's
Yeah.
through Reiki, through any natural therapy that is helping to remove blocks of energy and helping you to see a different perspective. You are gaining more knowledge about yourself, and therefore able to help your daughter
Yeah.
understand who she is as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, and then look, I'm not an expert, I'm not a mother yet, and I want to really strongly emphasize that, because there will be people listening to this thinking it's easy for you to say,
Mm.
you don't have kids, you haven't been through this. Yeah, I haven't, but what I have been through is treatment of children and their mothers, and the results over a 6 to 12 month period.
Yeah.
And that is where I can talk from a place of experience and knowledge and say that it does work.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. And look, you know, I've seen it too. And if I can use a clear example of myself, you know, like I said, I best relationship in this moment with my mum right now. You know, the fact that we do have open communication now, the fact that we're coming from um, a place of understanding, and like you said, a place of empathy for each other. Um, you know, I've done the work, I've put in the effort, and this is the result. I can actually have a conversation with my mum. You know, I can actually connect with her on a human level.
Mm.
And I actually know that she loves me now. It's not like a case of whether she doesn't or does. I know wholeheartedly she loves me. And that comes through healing this mother wound, healing, you know, the relationship of the past, healing the generational stuff as well. So, Mel, open communication, like you said, you know, I reject the fact that people say that you're not a mum yet. You are a mum. You're becoming a mum. Even before you were pregnant, I think you already were playing out that mother role. So open communication, that doesn't come easy. You know, what do people have to do to put that in place in that relationship with their daughters, or,
Mm.
you know, even with their own mum?
I think in order to have open communication, it's about vulnerability. So it's
Yeah.
about vulnerability, but also the courage to say how you feel,
Yeah.
and the having vulnerability, and the just the knowing that, you know, at the end of the day, you're doing this to find a better way. So if you're coming
Mm.
from a place of authenticity and love with the discussions with your mother or your daughter, then staying in that authentic space and not coming from anger or fear is
Yeah.
where the true words come out.
Yeah.
And that's the definition of open communication and how
Yeah.
we can seek it.
Yeah. Perfect. So coming from a place of empathy, you were saying, and not
Mm.
fear, just really
Yeah,
stepping into that trust.
and not judging yourself or your mum,
Yeah.
because everyone is only doing the best that they can with the information they have at the time in front of them. And we are very driven by fear a lot of the time. So we need to, there's either two ways to come from: fear or love.
Yeah.
And if you're not coming from fear and you're coming from love, you'll start to see the conversations in your life change.
Yeah.
The way you hold yourself in conversation change.
Yeah.
Your energy, your bodily reactions when you speak. When we
Yeah.
speak in fear, we have that tremble in our voice. We
Oh,
have
yeah.
that throat chakra that starts playing up and starts going,
Yeah.
and that's fear, right? Or sometimes, we yell because we think that if we yell, we won't be scared. But it's like,
Yeah.
well, that's
No,
just
I'm your mother.
amplifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, if I talk like this, I'll feel better. And you'll feel better, but you're like, well, that's probably not the best way to tackle it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just perfect. And look, if I can say, because the thoughts that are running through my head, and I know, like, to get to where I am, even it's, our relationship's just going to get better, but to get to where I am, it takes practice. You know what I mean? It takes, small steps. It's not, would you
Yeah,
say it's not a overnight kind of thing, building
absolutely.
a, yeah.
Absolutely. You don't just wake up one day and go, I'm going to have a coffee with my mum and I'm going to sort out all of this stuff from the last 15 years. And by the time I leave, it's going to be completely different. Like,
Yeah.
I think my healing with my own mum actually started when I moved to Melbourne 10 years ago. And
Yeah.
that was when, everything started coming up for me and for her, because there was distance, and there was distance where there was discomfort that I wasn't living there anymore. But I also had
Yeah.
discomfort in, well, I need to find out who I am, separate from my family.
Yeah.
And I think one of my favorite sayings is, it is okay to be separate and still belong to your family.
Love it. Because it's so true. Like, culturally ingrained, and like what you were saying, coming from war times, coming from, where survival and security wasn't always there for us. The only way to, our families or our mums think safety is you've got to be near me. It's
Yes.
that tribal mentality. Oh my God, the only way we're going to be safe is if we're together.
Together, and we're all
Yeah.
in the same state, and we're all catching up all the time,
Under
and if
the,
I can
yeah,
see you, you're okay.
yeah, yeah,
And it's not, doesn't have to be like that.
yeah,
It's
no.
I think we have to, and that's going to be heartbreaking, I'm sure, if my daughter decides to leave me. It will be, absolutely. But
Yeah,
I can just honestly say that I would not be close to my mum today like I am if I hadn't moved away.
yeah,
And I'm
absolutely.
so grateful for that.
Absolutely. I agree 100% on my part as well. Mel, say that statement again. I'm okay being separate and
Oh yeah, it is safe for me to be separate from my family and still belong.
safe for me to be separate from my family and still belong.
Yes.
Absolutely love it. Now, we've only got a couple of minutes left, and I have loved every minute of this chat. Like I said at the beginning, when we were going to record this show, there was just way too much stuff coming up for me to really give it the justice that it needs. And by all means, we definitely can do more shows around it, if I can say, because like you're saying, you can't just resolve all your issues in one cup of coffee. So
Yeah. Wouldn't life be really efficient if we could?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So Mel, is there anything else you want to add to help really get people to know that the mother wound, healing it, it's really okay, whatever the outcome is?
Yeah, I would say, don't be scared to explore it. Don't be scared of sitting with a cup of tea and a journal and just writing out a whole bunch of things. don't be scared to feel the trauma.
Yeah.
uh, I would say, as long as you have a great support network around you. And when I say support network, I think everyone, every single one of us, needs to either have regular contact with a coach, a counselor, a psychologist. We all need designated people to support us with our mental health, even when we are well, even
Yeah.
when we are, everything is fine. We just need someone to check in with. In the natural therapy space for us, we have naturopaths, kinesiologists, Reiki practitioners, yoga teachers. Give yourself a decent support network around you to be able to explore any trauma that comes up, because
Yeah.
our only way to heal trauma is to feel it,
Yeah.
and then we can release it.
Yeah, absolutely. Mel, your insights, like I think even just having this chat was doing some healing for me. So thank you
Oh, for
so
me
much.
too, probably both of us. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. And that happened. Oh.
Well, the realization I came, we've got about a minute left, was that, our parents, like my parents, my family, my grandparents, that generation, they moved to Australia for a better life for their children. And that, with us, back then it was that physical, like you were saying, in the lower chakras, the physical, the more tangible stuff. Now, what we're saying is we want a better life for our children, but it has to come in the way of more emotional, more mental healing. So,
Mhm.
that's exactly what we're doing. So a big shout out to my mum and to Mel's mum. I
Yeah.
haven't
Hi,
yet
Mum. She's
haven't
a
yet.
silver fox now. She looks amazing. She's
Oh,
got her grey bob happening.
I
She
love
looks
it.
the best she's looked in years. I'm so happy for her, inside
Yeah,
and out of herself. Mm.
yeah, beautiful. I love the silver foxes. Well, what do they call winners? Foxettes. I'll call them
Yeah, what do they call
a
women? But anyway, to our
foxette.
mums, I think
Yeah.
they are both incredible ladies.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi, Mum. I should probably watch this, or I'll get her to watch this. But, guys, you've been listening to the Hummingbird Talks. We happen every Wednesday. We talk about spirituality, health, and wellness. Today, we were talking about our mums and healing the mother wound. Next week, some interesting topics coming up next week. So, we're talking with a guy who's developed his own modality, has done 20 years of science and hard study as well. So be interesting to see what happens next week. So guys, tune in. These are the Hummingbird Talks. This is Radio Northern Beaches 88.7 and 90.3. Thanks, Mel. Thanks for joining. And I'll see you guys next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.